This is very personal work for me.
Politics.
I believe I was called to
Sex.
tell my story, use my voice, be a voice for the community, to speak to and for a community of people that's been ignored, denied,
Love.
overlooked.
Relationships. Religion.
This is my life's work.
Religion.
I want to use words to uplift, heal, inspire, encourage.
Do something different. Every Monday at 10.
Good day, thinkers, thought leaders, progressors, and dreamers. I am Craig the Writer Stewart, and this is So Much to Say. These are my thoughts in my voice on black shit, white shit, gay shit, and everything in between. So this is a very special podcast because normally we do not publish on Fridays. But I just got some amazing news. I'm one of the featured authors at this year's 2017 Essence Festival in New Orleans. So if you're in New Orleans, meet me at the Ernest Morial Convention Center Friday, June 30th at 1 p.m. And even if you aren't going to be there, you know someone that will. So please pass along the information. The details are on my website, www.craigthewriterstewart.com. Take a listen to an interview that I did with the history of Black Gay America.
You know we can't do a radio show without having somebody here at our media studio as a special guest. This particular brother is a return guest, and it's been a few years since he's
It's been more than a few.
It's been a few years since he's been on our show. He actually appeared on our radio show when we started our media division back in fall 2009, going into 2010, and I do remember that. And that was actually during the success of his play, A Day in the Life. And that's how we met, because we actually did some graphic design and marketing materials for your play when you first launched it.
Yeah.
And we go way back. And as the old elders used to say, look how far God has brought us. We have famed author, producer, writer, and all of that other good stuff. Craig Stewart is in the building. What's happening, man?
Hey, how you doing?
All is well, man. It's just so good to see you and your growth, your evolution, and you're an author now, and actually on your second book now, man.
Yeah.
And so we're here to talk about that. Your first release, of course, entitled Words Never Spoken.
Yeah.
And then what's the name of your second release?
The second book it's the sequel. It's One Thing for Certain, Two Things for Sure, a memoir continued.
Wow.
Yeah.
Kind of tell us a little bit about what was the inspiration that, inspired you to actually write?
I never really set out to write a book.
Mm-hmm.
When I first moved to Atlanta, I came here for the sole purpose of writing music. That's all I thought I could or wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Sometime after that, I ended up writing and producing a stage play called A Day in the Life, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
It sold out at 14th Street Playhouse.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, that play, it was inspired by a relationship that I had. The very first guy that I fell in love with was HIV positive.
Wow.
And so that relationship inspired that play. It was about the 6 gay characters that I believe represent the persona that we find in the gay community. So everyone from the most feminine and flamboyant character, or the queen, all the way down to the DL straight identified character who doesn't believe that they're gay. But in between those two characters, you have the transgender who believes she should have been born a woman. You have the minister of music of a church. You also have the closeted professional. You have so basically it's 6 of them, and so they come together in this focus group. And so I produced the play. It sold out, and then 2 productions after that, or the next 2 productions, the show flopped, and then it sold out again in 2007. We opened to 13 shows in 2007, and the show sold out. But between the first show and the 4th show, I experienced a depression, and I wasn't really aware that I was experiencing this depression.
Wow.
Because I had founded a greeting card company, Say It in a Card.
I remember that too.
And so once the play had flopped those times, I had started focusing my energy on the greeting card business. And so we found our way into 7 stores. Each of those stores closed up as a result of the economy crashing. And as a result of that, my car was repossessed. There were eviction notices on my door. My bank account was overdrawn $660. And so I ended up living with one of my friends, my friend Angela. And she said, just take some time. Just you didn't plan for any of this to happen. Just try to focus on, what you need to do. Mm-hmm. And I got a little job at a neighborhood restaurant. And then there was just a whisper. There were so many things that happened along the way that kind of gently urged me in the direction of moving to LA. I didn't understand why I would move to LA or why I was getting this feeling to move to LA, because if I was having a difficult financial time in Atlanta, it just didn't make sense. It wasn't feasible for me to move to LA. But again, it was a whisper in my spirit. It's just a tugging in my gut and my soul. And it persisted because I ignored it the first time. And then a few months later, the same whisper. And so I started praying about it, and I asked God that if this was really what you wanted me to do, then to make it a seamless process, to put things into motion for it to happen, to facilitate a move from Atlanta all the way across the country to LA. And so that was what happened. And so the first book, Words Never Spoken, opens with the relationship that I had with the guy that was HIV positive. But by the end of that book, it brings you to the moment that I boarded that plane in Atlanta and moved to LA. And then one thing for certain, two things for sure, picks up with what happened when I got to LA.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. I didn't even know that you had moved away.
Yeah. So basically, it was in LA that I wrote the first book.
Okay.
And I believe that God called me to LA because I don't believe that the book would have been written had I never left Atlanta. There's something about stepping outside of yourself, something about stepping outside of the bubble. For me,
your comfort zone. Yeah, your comfort zone.
Yeah, for me at the time, Atlanta was that bubble. And so for me to step outside of that and to look back and see myself, the journey that I had made, because living in LA is the city of dreamers. So you have so many people there that have moved there for the purpose of becoming a dancer, becoming a photographer or a writer or a singer or an actor or whatever it is that they go for. And so I was meeting all of these different kinds of people while I was living there. And just through them, I realized that I had already done all of the things that they were talking about doing. And previously, I hadn't given myself much credit because I was so hard on myself when I lived in Atlanta and just felt like because I wasn't where I wanted to be financially or professionally that I hadn't really accomplished anything. But it wasn't until I moved to LA and started looking at these other people who were really, really trying to do all of the things that I had already done. Because by that time, I had already written for Brandy, although I had never gotten a song placed on an album. I had already worked with Tweet. Tyler Perry had already come to my show, called the show brilliant. I mean, I had already done so many things. Greeting cards had been in 7 stores, even though the business ended up folding. But I was living, and I was doing it. So in LA was where I started getting epiphany after epiphany, and I started to see myself differently. And I sat down and started writing Words Never Spoken.
Wow, man. This is awesome. This is so awesome to hear your testimony. And we're going to take a quick commercial break, our only commercial break for the show. When we come back, we have more with our returning guest, Brother Craig Stewart, right here on History of Black Gay America, where we encourage you to know your history.
Good day, thinkers, thought leaders, progressives, and dreamers. I am Craig the Writer Stewart, author of Words Never Spoken and host of So Much to Say podcast, encouraging you to know your history and heritage on Meek Productions presents History of Black Gay America. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this break.
Greetings, this is Dedrick Tillerson, founder of For Us Sports Foundation. Since our humble beginnings in 2014, our mission has been to uplift, educate, connect, and promote success in the LGBT community through the avenue of sports. Not only do we produce tournaments throughout the year, we also provide mentoring, develop talent pools, volunteer our time, and institute solid plans to help build awareness around the LGBT sports movement. For more information about how you can support the growth of our foundation, visit our website at www.4ussports.org. Again, that's www.forussports.org. Whatever your favorite sport or game is, know that you have a home here at For Us Sports. We definitely look forward to seeing you at our next tournament.
Meek Productions is proud to be an official media partner for this organization. Once again, we're here with our returning guest, who hasn't been with us for a minute, Brother Craig Stewart, famed author, producer, songwriter, multi-talented artist, and glad to still have you with us, my man.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're going to continue where we left off. Now, when you actually moved to L.A., and that was actually what inspired you to write Words Never Spoken, talk to us about the inspiration for the second book after the success of the first book.
Well, with the second book, One Thing for Certain, Two Things for Sure, I really had no idea that I was going to write a second book. Like I said before, didn't know that I was going to write a first book. It really... I believe the book wanted to be written, and I believe that's why I was summoned or called to L.A. to write this book, the first book. And so I was busy touring with Words Never Spoken, and 3 years had passed. I had recorded the audio version of Words Never Spoken, and I was getting emails from so many readers asking, where's the rest? When's the next book going to come out? And I just kept saying, well, there is no next book. Because, I mean, it really, I didn't think I had more to say. I thought I had said everything that I needed to say in the first book. But I started outlining. Some things started coming to me, and I started outlining because I wanted to be sure that I had enough to say, and that not only did I have enough to say, but I loved what I was going to say. Because I couldn't just put it out because people were asking. You know, one of the promises that I made to myself many years ago, starting out before anybody knew who I was as a writer, was that I wouldn't become one of those artists that just put things out just simply because people wanted to hear from me.
This is true.
So I started outlining, and as I started outlining things that I could talk about, I was just like, oh, wow, I didn't talk about this. Or, you know, just things that had come up once I had gotten to L.A. and things that I could reach back and expound on that had happened in the first book and in earlier years in my life. And so I started outlining it. So 3 years after Words Never Spoken came out, I released One Thing for Certain, Two Things for Sure. I have yet to record the audio version of it, though. So
wow.
I am going to be doing that soon because I host a podcast now. It's called So Much to Say, and I have so much to say.
Okay.
And, you know, on the podcast, we talk about black shit, white shit, gay shit, everything in between. So we're about to take a hiatus. We're every single Monday. The podcast is every single Monday. It's on SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts, it's available. So when I take this hiatus from So Much to Say, I'm going to record the audio version of One Thing for Certain, Two Things for Sure.
What inspired you to actually do a podcast?
Again, it just kind of fell in my lap. I'm writing a third book. It's called Book of Jewels. Have no idea when I'm going to release it. I've been working on it for probably the past 3 years, on and off. And so I was sharing a piece of it with one of my friends over the phone from college. And I was reading it to her, and she said, oh, my God, Craig, this is so amazing. Because Book of Jewels is unlike the two-part memoir series. It really is a complete departure. It's a personal development book. It's right now, it's just going to be 10 chapters. And each chapter is symbolic of one of the greatest life lessons that I've learned. And within those chapters, I talk about how I arrived at those lessons. So I do give you personal accounts from my life, but it's just not, it's not like a novel. I would say it's like a cross between Acts of Faith and the Four Agreements.
Okay.
So there's a chapter called Dating, and I do give you personal accounts. And each chapter opens with an original quote that kind of encapsulates that chapter. But there's a chapter called Dating. There's a chapter called Love and Fear. The first chapter is called Life. The very last chapter is called Death. So I talk about things that, you know, happened in my life and how I arrived at the greatest life lessons. So again, the book is called Book of Jewels. So I was sharing that a chapter with one of my friends from college, and she said, oh my God, you need to do a podcast. And she was probably the third person that had just kind of said it in passing to me. And I was just like, well, what's a podcast? Like I kind of had an idea of what it was because when I lived in L.A., and I think that your life foreshadows things that are coming. So many years ago when I lived in L.A. and I wrote the first book, I participated on the podcast for like 3 months. They actually recorded once a month, where I record once a week, every Monday.
That's how we started, every Monday.
Exactly. So I was kind of familiar with it, but really wasn't sure how many people really listened to it. And so I started doing some investigating, and I asked my friend in California who hosts one, and I asked another friend here, how did they get started? How do you do it? You know, that kind of thing. And I just started looking into it because I have so much to say, no pun intended, but I just wanted to find a way to be able to connect with people because social media is an amazing way. And I post a lot of the things that I think about on my social media, my Facebook, my Instagram, that kind of thing. I use all of those mediums to kind of tell a story. But there's no better way than for people to be able to hear your voice, to hear the texture in your voice, to hear your tone, to hear your inflections, and to be able to talk about those things on a weekly basis on an extensive platform, if you will. Being able to reach people in different cities and different countries because even though social media is universal and you can reach so many different people, the way that they adjust the algorithms now, everyone doesn't see your post. Where with my podcast, someone could just simply subscribe.
Yes, they can.
And then they'll get the notifications each Monday when I do a new show. And they can go on and they can just kind of listen to it. So, yeah, it just made sense. And so, again, like, we've done some very interesting shows on So Much to Say. We talked about domestic violence and gay relationships, which was an incredible show. We talk about the school to prison pipeline. We talked about sex. We have a show coming up where we talk about whether or not you would date someone HIV positive. So we talk about a range of things, you know, but we have some really good shows coming up. One of my favorites is a show that we did called Dear White People.
Okay.
Because again, we talk about black shit, white shit, gay shit, and everything in between. So, but yeah, I'm really, really enjoying doing this podcast.
That's awesome, man. Welcome to the media world. What I am interested in finding out was in the process of writing your second book, was you still in LA or did you already move back to Atlanta? And what inspired you to come back to ATL? Yeah,
I was back on the East Coast when I started writing One Thing for Certain, Two Things for Sure. The story begins in LA, but I physically was on the East Coast. I came back to Atlanta because once I started writing Words Never Spoken, the first book, I knew, because I started writing Words Never Spoken 3 months after I got to LA, or 2 months after I got to LA. And so I knew as I was writing that was the reason I was in LA, for no other reason but to be there, because I only knew 2 people in LA. And LA is one of those places where that it can feel very lonely when you don't have a tribe, when you don't have a network, when you don't have a support system. I didn't have any of those things. And so it started to feel very lonely once I was nearing the end of writing Words Never Spoken. And so I started making plans to come back to the East Coast because it made sense for me to come to Atlanta because, as I mentioned before, I had already sold out this stage play and I had founded this greeting card business that was once circulating in the city. So I knew there were people here who knew me as a writer, who knew that I could write, and people who would support me right off the bat. So if nothing else, I could at least sell 50 books to people who knew me or who knew about the play. So it made sense to come to Atlanta. And Atlanta is one of those places, is one of those cities that will celebrate you for accomplishing. You don't have to be a star. Where with LA and sometimes New York, you have to be a star for them to support your work, to support your craft, to support your art. But with Atlanta, this city really does celebrate the artist, and they will celebrate you and support you because you did it, because you accomplished it. So those are the reasons that I came back to Atlanta. And so one of my friends, in addition to readers who kept saying, you know, are you going to put out a second book? There has to be more. And I kind of thought if I ever did write a second book, it would be probably 20 years after the first book, you know, when I had more to say. But I had plenty to say. I guess I just didn't give myself time to really think about it because I was busy touring with the first book and doing book signings and promotion and just all of that kind of stuff. So I really didn't give myself the time to sit down and really think about it. Where like in LA, I was isolated. That was what I was doing. I was writing the book. So one of my friends had said to me, he said, I really think you need to write a second book. And that's when I really started to think about it and really started to outline it.
I just love how I'm connected to the Omniverse. So I just love how the creator of the Omniverse really inspired you and motivated you to move to LA because from what I'm hearing, you needed to be in that space.
Yeah.
You needed to be in that space to where that other gift can manifest.
Because I never even knew that it was there. Yeah. Here's the reality. Faith doesn't have to make sense.
It sure doesn't.
And that's what moving to LA taught me. It also taught me that you have to be willing to adapt to whatever comes your way. You have to be willing to move any way the wind blows. And that was what it taught me. Because, again, I had no idea that I would end up writing a book. And when my instincts first told me or directed me or instructed me to move to LA, like I said, I ignored it. And even when I started to pay attention to it, and like I said earlier, I started praying for God to make a seamless process. If this is what you were asking me to do, I need you to make a seamless process. So even down to the plane ticket to LA, it cost me, I think, $69 one way. And I give you the full story in the book, but even down to the plane ticket, like it just fell into place. Me selling the things that I had left to sell. As I mentioned, my car had already been repossessed, so I just had furniture and clothes. So, but every single piece of furniture, the pots, the pans, I sold everything.
Wow.
And then 2 weeks after I was in LA, I ended up buying a car.
Wow.
So it was not about me having to have a car here in Atlanta. I think the universe, God, was positioning me to move to LA. He was making things, he was putting things in motion. I think that's why my car had been repossessed. I believe that's why I lost my place, because I wasn't going to need any of that stuff. Because if I had any of that stuff to hold on to, I would have given myself more reason, more excuses to stay in Atlanta. I wouldn't have just flown. And so because I was stripped of all of those things, I think God was making my life, my stay in Atlanta more difficult, increasingly difficult. It was almost like he was pinching me so that I would feel the pain and I would just go ahead and leave. And so I did. And so he was squeezing me out of Atlanta by way of the car repossession, losing the place, and the bank account being overdrawn, all of those things. But then he restored all of that once I got to LA, because 2 weeks after I was there, I bought a new car. And again, it was on faith. Didn't have a job yet, but I bought another car, and I started writing the book, and that was how it happened.
Wow, man. Powerful testimony from a powerful, talented brother. Thank you so much for sharing, man.
Thank you so much. I just hope that I can continue to use words to uplift, to reach, to teach, to heal. In particular, heal some of the frustration and some of the emotional wounds that come with being gay, in particular, Black and gay.
Wow, man. How can people reach you?
My website is www.craigthewriterstewart.com. That is also my Instagram. That is also my Facebook. It's just Craig the Writer Stewart. And of course, the podcast. It's So Much to Say. And it's on iTunes. It's on SoundCloud. But also, I just want to let everybody know that on Friday, June 30th, I will be signing books in New Orleans at the Essence Festival.
All right,
so
man.
At the 27,
Congrats.
I just got the confirmation yesterday. So at the 2017 Essence Festival in New Orleans on Friday, June 30th at 1 p.m.
Yeah.
I'll be at the Ernest Morial Convention Center.
Awesome, man. Congrats for that.
But the details are on my website, CraigTheWriterStewart.com.
And on that note, you all, thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of History of Black Gay America, where we encourage you to know your history and know your heritage. And don't forget to follow us on all of our social media outlets at History, BLKGAY USA, either on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Until next time, we'll hear from you soon.